Welcome and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone joining us around the world. And thank you for joining us today for today's webinar, Standards in Computer Science, What, Why, and How. Today, you'll be hearing from Edward Al, Vice President for the Standards Activities Board, Lynn Robert Carter, Vice Chair for the Standards Activities Board, and Jonathan Goldberg, Manager of Operational Program Management at the IEEE Standards Association. And I'm Scott Levine. I'm the Computer Society's membership manager and will be your host and moderator. Each presenter is going to give a short presentation, and afterwards we'll have our AMA session. We had a ton of questions submitted in advance. While you might not ask your question specifically, we will do our best to cover as many questions and topics as we can. If you have a question you want to ask, please type it into the chat box and button you see on your screen. I'm going to briefly introduce our three speakers and then we'll get started. First up will be Edward Al, the 2024 Vice President for Standards Activities of the IEEE Computer Society. The Computer Society is home to over 215 active standards, and as Vice President, Edward oversees the entire operation, including the development of new standards and the continuous updating of existing standards. Edward actively participates and contributes to IEEE 802 Landman Standards Committee. He is currently the chair of 802.18 Radio Regulatory Technology Advisory Group. He is also the founding chair of IEEE 802.11ay, a co-editor of the 802.11b task group, and an editor of the 802.11be. Edward has published tens of papers and patents, and in 2021 was the recipient of the IEEE SA Standards Medallion for exceptional leadership and skill in driving development of IEEE 802.11 wireless LAN standards. Following Edward will be Jonathan Goldberg, a manager of operational program management with the IEEE Standards Association. For over 10 years, Jonathan has been managing, supporting, involving the IEEE Standards Association standards development process in partnership with various IEEE technical communities, global organizations, and individual experts. With a BS in Computer Information Systems and an MBA in Project Management, Jonathan's expertise, skills, and personal development lies in technology, business governance, and technical community engagement. And last but not least will be Dr. Lynn Robert Carter. Lynn has over 50 years of experience in software engineering practice, management, education, research. He has an extensive background in research in development of systems in various domains for industry, defense, and medical applications. Dr. Carr has been an educator over his entire career at numerous universities. His first appointment was a part-time faculty member at Portland State University in 1971 and accepted a full-time position in 2000. His industrial career started in 1973, covering nearly 20 years, including stints at Tektronix and Motorola Microsystems, to name a few. He then spent 23 years working with Carnegie Mellon University. For the first 12, he did field work at military bases and then transitioned to a full-time educator position. In 2001, he was asked to help launch CMU's Silicon Valley campus. He then tailored a software engineering program for the Qatar campus and led a team as it created 6 undergraduate programs that established a new science and technology university in Kazakhstan. Dr. Carter has been an active Computer Society volunteer for over 40 years. He is currently a senior member of IEEE, serves as the vice chair of the Computer Society Standards Activities Board, chair of the IEEE Software and Systems Engineering Standards Committee, and holds various roles in multiple of our standards working groups, which you'll find out more as we go through today's presentation. So Edward, without further ado, I circle back to you to lead us off today.
Okay, great. Thank you, Scott, for the introduction. Great. Scott is our Computer Society Membership Manager. So he actually oversees all of our operations related to readiness. So I'm very grateful for all of you who is able to attend the Ask Us Anything section. This is not a typical Ask Me Anything because in addition to me, the VP, I also have my vice chair, I mean Nin, who is with us so that uh, we can cover as many questions as possible. And also we have Jonathan, who I'm grateful to work with him for more than about 10 years already. And he is very, he is very knowledgeable in the essay operations because I understand that when you have a chance to submit questions to this Ask Us Anything section. Actually, I see many of you actually have questions. I believe more than 10 questions about how standards are operate, how you can initiate standard projects, and how the standard project become a published standards. So that's why I also invite Jonathan from SA, the Standard Association, to be with us so that he can give you a top-down approach about how standards operate. But anyway, for the format, this here is actually very similar to the town hall of our President Judica did in the last month for the Ask Us Anything section. That is, we represent a few slides from each of us so that you have a big picture about what our society doing, what the Computer Society standard portfolio is, and also what what's the value or the importance of standard. And so after that, we will answer as many questions as possible if we can. But before we start, actually we are start already, but I mean before I go into the details, this is standard have their own bylaw and operation manual, and this is the disclaimer that I want to let you know that for all the presentations and all the viewpoints that delivered by my vice chair Lin, by my buddy Jonathan, who is from SA, and also by myself. These are all our own personal and independent opinion. It may not reflect the position of IEEE Computer Society, and also the IEEE Standard Association. Okay, so actually, through the Ask Us Anything question, I mean, because as I mentioned, many of you submit questions in advance. Some of the questions actually just about why we need to do standards, because many of you actually say that maybe publications or a conference is already great enough. So what's the point to do standards? What's the importance of standards? So, but think about one thing. I know that maybe not many of you may realize, but think about have some a little bit wide imagination if the world with those standard, what it can be. For example, if there's no standardized traffic light, for example, if one country believed that, oh, the red light should be stopped, but another country say that the red light should be go through. So actually, without this kind of standardized traffic size, you may always have traffic congestion. No one may know how to drive because different countries may have different regulations on the traffic. You may think this is a little bit extreme, but how about if there's a chance that all the power pumps or the USB charger or the charger are not standardized, that you even when you are traveling, you even do not know what kind of things or what kind of charger you need to buy because they are not standardized at all. So then it will create unnecessary inconvenience for all of you if you travel from country to countries. And even, many of us right now are actually relying on Wi-Fi, which is the 802.11 technologies that developed based in a Computer Society Standard Committee. So what's the problem if there's no common mechanism for you to connect to Wi-Fi? So what I mean is, if you have buy a product from a particular company, but the access point is not from another company, so and they cannot talk with one another, and you connect to Wi-Fi, right? This is a very bad experience Because at the end, you really want to have a good experience when you use, no matter what kind of device you're using, what kind of laptops you're using, you can still connect to Wi-Fi reliably and securely, right? So actually, one of the question I want to answer is standards actually is a common language. Actually, from ISO, which is, I believe Jonathan may talk about a little bit because it is our partner standard organization. So standard actually is a document that provides requirements, specifications, guidelines, or characteristics that can be used consistently to ensure the materials, product, process, and services are fit for the purpose. And the key word that I want to emphasize is consistently, because in this case, everyone who, no matter who are the users, who are the stakeholders or the manufacturers, really have a common guideline or common specification to follow. So in this case, at least there is a basic set of minimum requirements that they are common to one another. And then this is a common language for us to talk. And as we may a little bit talk about later, actually in standard, we really have different kinds of publications. We can have standards, we can have recommended guidelines, we can also have a guide. So it really depends how strong the language we want for this kind of written language. So for us, for Computer Society, actually, we are one of the biggest contributors to the IEEE Standard Association. We are the second largest contributors to the IEEE. And actually, as of today, when I just look at the information I have from Standard Association, actually, we have more than 274 active projects that are ongoing that you as a Computer Society member, or even you are not a Computer Society member, you can really participate and contribute. And also we have more than, I mean, just below 250 high quality and market relevant standards. And they are all, as I showed in the slide, they are all covered by 17 different standard committees that covering different kinds of topics that are relevant to our society. For example, if you are interested in AI or ML, you can go to the Artificial Intelligence Committee. If you are interested in blockchain or DL, you can go to blockchain. And we also have other like cloud computing. For emerging technologies like metaverse, like quantum computing, you can always go to the Computer Society Standard Activity Board Standard Committee. And we also are, and many of you actually from the C question, you are interested in privacy and security, then you can also go to the Cybersecurity and Privacy Committee, so on and so forth. Actually, there are many, many different kinds of topics and areas covered by these 17 standard committees that are all within the scope of work of our Computer Society. And I believe many of you may come from one of the technical communities inside our society, because our society have 30 technical communities, right? So I suppose one of, at least there is always one of them, I mean, this standard committee that may be relevant to you and you may be interested to participate, no matter as an observer, as an active contributor, or even as a main participant. And actually, many of them, some of them may be having in-person meeting that you need to travel, but many of them actually encourage hybrid or mixed mode meetings that you can join as long as you're available, I mean, in your time zone. So, and I will give you a quick few examples so that you know more about some of the standard committees before I actually give the floor to Jonathan to talk a little bit more about how the standard operations work. So for example, one thing, as I just mentioned, and also because this is part of my job, I work in Ego2 for more than 15 years already. And I believe many of you connect to this webinar. Actually, many of you may use Wi-Fi to connect to the internet and listen to this webinar and ask us anything section. Actually, Ego 2011, the original standard published in 1997. So to this year, it's only about 27 or 28 years. And at that time, well, not many people know how to use it or they like to use it. But thinking about now, you can see from the chart that I showed below, this is a chart from a trade organization that support the IEEE 2011 standard, that is the Wi-Fi Alliance. You can see that actually by the end of actually the 2023, there are already more than 4.1 billion annual device shipments. And actually, from 1997 to now, there are just below 46 billion device shipments all over the world. But think about this. This is like 27 years ago, we have nothing, and now we have above 46 billion. It's really a great example that you can see how we contribute not only to the technology, but also to the world, because now everyone using Wi-Fi, no matter is I mean anytime, anywhere. And even if you read recent news, actually in Austria, people are always also talk about the possibility to have the Wi-Fi in the space. So actually, you can see that for us, for our computer society, I understand that many of our areas and propagations and conference, maybe we are very academic focused from many people point of view, but actually from the standard operation, we are very high market relevant and make sure that the stakeholders can really use it and implement it, and you as a users can really experience and use it. Another example, because some of the sick questions that I load is that, oh, what are our standing committee on AI is doing? So for AI, if there's anything that relate to governance and practice of the in artificial intelligence, like the machine learning, the big data training, or even the benchmark of different kinds of AI metrics, actually our artificial intelligence standing committee is very active. They now have more than 40 active parts, and also have about 10 published standards covering many different kinds of areas. And I just show you a little example now. Recently, they have some publications. I mean, the standards relate to the performance benchmarking of the AI server, and also they actually also have the architecture and framework and application about the fragile machine learning. And another one that is also, I'm sorry, it's very great that widely used by industry is the standards from our design automation. Because I know some of them you may actually more software related, and you may need to use system C, you may need to use Verilog, and all the different kinds of tools for design automation. And in addition to the VDHL, and actually for our design automation standard committee, their standards are very great and always used by the industry who need to produce the ASIC or the microprocessor and the others, including those standard like the 1666, which is our standard for standard system C language, and also 1800, which is about the system Verilog. So many of you may not use it, but actually for those who, for example, need to manufacture or design a laptop or design a phone, actually these kind of standards are very necessary for them to follow. And another thing, as I talked about early on, because for computer society, in addition to many different kinds of areas that we already used to, like the AI, machine learning, knowledge engineering, and also, for example, computer security and privacy and the others, we actually also aim for some emerging technical areas, because some of them, many of the emerging technical applications are very relevant to our field of interest of computer society. So for anything like quantum technologies, like quantum computing, and also materials, for example, including the AR, the VR, and mixed reality, all the works are actually now done in the subset. We call it the Standard Activity Board Standard Committee. So if you are interested in contributing to the quantum computing standards and also the material standards, please feel free to join many of the active projects there. We have at least 4 quantum computing related active projects and about 10 metaverse active projects that you can contribute. And also, actually, our contributors and our volunteers who and standard developers who actually participate in the standards not only dedicated, but they are also recognized by many different societies and also even inside IEEE, especially Standard Association, because many of our participants are award winners. They actually get many different kinds of great essay award, like the Emerging Technology Award, the International Award, the Lifetime Achievement Award, and also the Standard Medicant. So this photo here, you can also see our President Judica. So recently, about a few months ago, she also got her Standard Medallion Award because of her great contribution to the functional safety standard inside computer society. And actually, as some of you may know, actually right now, for the federal application, one of the category is standard contribution. And actually, a few of our contributors also recently elevated as IEEE fellows because of their contributions to the computer society standards. So all in all, this is the very high level picture about what our computer society standard operations is doing. This is really just a very high level top-down approach, because if you want to know more about each of them, you can go to this link, and also feel free to ask me, Link, and Jonathan any question in the remaining about 30 to 45 minutes, or even after the end of the Ask Anything session. We're very happy to provide you any pointer and any information you may have, so as to encourage you and motivate you to join our standard operation. So now let me give the floor to Jonathan, because as I mentioned, many of you want to know how standard work. So that's why I have our expert here, Jonathan, who I am grateful to work with for the last 10 years. He is very professional to let you know how the standard operation inside the Standard Association. So let me give the floor to you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Edward. I really appreciate the invitation and the fantastic introduction. Couldn't have said it any better myself. Thanks. Let me share my screen here for you.
Yes, I can see that, Jonathan. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about the IEEE SA and the standards development process in general. I'm going to go through the whole presentation, but I won't spend too long on every slide. There's a lot of information in here, and we'll share it with you afterwards. And there's a lot of opportunity to explore further in here. Obviously, Edward's given you a great overview of the IEEE and the IEEE Computer Society. IEEE's overall mission to advance technology for humanity touches so many different technical communities and networks and engineering topics, computing topics. We have hundreds of thousands of members across 160 countries, and I think almost 100 years of publications, humanitarian work, and developing standards. We've developed standards for actually over 100 years. I was actually able to find a standard on microfilm last year from, I think, the early 1920s, which I thought was pretty awesome. In the Standards Association, our mission is to raise the world's standards by creating spaces to engage people in from different communities, diverse backgrounds in emerging and evolving technology areas, and also to drive the development of market-relevant open standards to advance global technologies, their platforms, as well as promoting innovation and keeping public safety, security, health, and well-being in mind, and contributing to a sustainable future. That's always part of our mission and discussion. And so the IEEE SA offers really a suite of programs and offerings for a lot of different applications and a lot of different ways to engage in the SA and in and around the standards ecosystems. I always like to kind of show a very high-level structural org chart. I know there's a lot of boxes on here, but I try to highlight where the Standards Association resides in the bigger IEEE. The IEEE SA and technical activities are two different organizational units within the IEEE. Under technical activities is where the technical societies reside, such as the Computer Society. We have dozens of technical societies that focus on many different disciplines and have many the wide range of activities that go on within those societies, within their field of interest. And then the Standards Associations, IEEE, SASB, or Standards Association Standards Board, oversees and manages the standards development process. And so the technical societies at some point decide that they'd like to develop standards. And so it's really a partnership between the standards board and the SA and the technical communities and the societies and TA that form a standards committee with a specific scope within the field of interest of the technical society that oversees the development of standards development projects approved by the IEEE SASB. And so my role, and working with Edward and the Computer Society for many years, is I provide direct support and engagement and guidance and assistance to the working groups and the individuals and entities participating in the development of these standards and really how to navigate the standards development process. And I'm hoping over the next few slides I paint a good picture for you of what that looks like. And of course, happy to answer any questions about it once we get closer to the end. This is a very little bit of an eye chart, but these are all of the technical societies within the IEEE, the Computer Society being one of them. There are many societies that have standards committees that develop standards in partnership with the IEEE SA, but there are several that don't. But obviously, as we continue to grow and technology continues to flourish in so many different communities and areas, that continues to increase as well. We have well over half of the societies within IEEE developing standards. And the standards development process is obviously core to the IEEE SA, but we also offer several different ways to engage in that realm. We also offer pre-standardization opportunities in an industry connections program where groups can come together and interest groups can come together to develop technical reports or white papers, or even develop new standards development projects based on some exploratory discussions and workshops. We also work with and around conformity assessment. We have the IEEE Conformity Assessment Program that allows groups to develop a conformance assessment program based on standards developed within the IEEE. And we also have a policy engagement. There's a group within the IEEE SA that works directly with governments around the world to actually bring standards, the technical standards developed within IEEE, into the conversation and how those governments form their policies and engage with their broader communities. And the IEEE SA also has what we call practices, where instead of focusing so specifically on a very narrow technical topic, we have groups of the practices, including connectivity and telecommunications, mobility and sustainability, that are meant to stretch across the entire IEEE. It's an opportunity to have a conversation mostly, obviously, about standards, but then also how those broader technical communities can engage with each other across all of the different organizational units within the IEEE. And the IEEE SASB, as I mentioned before, they oversee and manage the standards development process within the IEEE, and mainly to promote openness, fairness, balance, transparency, and right of appeal for the individuals and entities participating in standards development. And this is a colorful picture of that standards development journey, or really how it flows around in the conversation. And it always starts with an idea. And I think Edward alluded to that earlier. An individual or an organization may come to the IEEE or be interacting in a pre-standardization activity or some other means and come up with an idea for developing a standard. Whether to grow a market or ensure interoperability or spread adoption on new technology, that new idea comes into us, and we work with the individuals or entities to figure out what the right way to engage with the SA is in that range of programs that I mentioned before. And then a proposal or a standards development project is brought forward to the standards board for approval, and with the SASB's approval to develop the standard, the working group is formed to write the standard, and then it moves through a balloting, which is a broader consensus process, and onto publication and maintenance. And this is a little bit more of a focus, just very simplistic flowchart of that same concept, where a PAR or a project authorization request is approved, and the PARs are active for 4 years. And the working group that's comprised of the individual or organizational experts that are contributing the technologies, the material, within the scope of that active project, they come together and write the document. I mean, that's where you put the pen to paper, is in the working group. And that can take several years, potentially, depending on the scope of the project, how quickly a working group can reach consensus in determining what material should and should not be in the draft standard. And then it moves to, as I mentioned before, an essay balloting and a public review process to gain broader consensus outside of the working group. And then once the essay ballot process is complete, it's then the whole project is submitted to the standards board for review and approval. All standards approved by the standards board are active for 10 years, and then it moves into either an inactive status if it's not revised within 10 years. So you can see here standards are very cyclical. It's important to know, we all know that technology doesn't stay the same. And so as technology grows, the standards can grow with it. And there's an opportunity to modify, update, or maintain or revise the standards. And Edward alluded to earlier, we do develop 3 different kinds of standards in the IEEE. There's either a mandatory requirements document, which is called a standard, but we also provide recommended practices and guides, where recommended practice allows the working group to develop a standard that has a preferred position, as well as guides that provide opportunities for the implementer of the technology with different approaches to on that same technology. There's also 2 different ways to develop standards, or methods in the IEEE to develop standards. There's the individual method and the entity method. The individual method is just that. It's the individual technical expert, the individual that's interested in the project, can participate in the working group, make technical contributions, become a voting member. There's no cost. There's no minimum requirements. If you are interested in participating, you are welcome to. Whereas in the entity method, it's a one company, one vote. The participants are the companies themselves, or the organizations that are actually an IEEE entity member. They pay an annual membership to be able to join the entity-based working groups and participate from the company perspective. So you could have 5 people or 50 people from the same company. They still only get 1 vote. And so depending on the technology or the market or the community, one method might be better serving the community than the other. And that's an opportunity to discuss as we're developing new standards. And these are some areas to focus on when you're working on developing a new standard within the IEEE. Title, type, scope, purpose, need, which standards committee, which area of focus or field of interest is most appropriate for the technology that you're working on standardizing, as well as copyright and any existing standards that may be out there in the world. And this is that cyclical, kind of a cyclical picture that I mentioned before on the standards development process where, and there's lots of helpful links in each of these slides as well. This goes out to a lot of helpful information if you want to dive in deeper. This kind of shows you the different stages expected in developing standards within the IEEE through drafting, balloting, gaining approval, and then the maintenance cycle, as I mentioned before. And the IEEE SA offers several tools for individuals and organizations to develop standards within the IEEE. We provide a public website, a WebEx, so you can hold virtual meetings, an online document repository, as well as email distribution lists that anyone can subscribe to. And as I mentioned before, myself and my team that I work with here in the SA, as program managers, we're really the primary point of contact for standards committees and working groups to assist with that entire standards development process that I just explained. You have any questions on how to get involved, any questions on a specific action that you can take at a specific point in an existing project, or even if you have a new project idea, you can reach out to staff such as myself, and we're happy to help you work through and get into the process that best fits you. And of course, I include my contact information here. I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you so much for listening to me. I look forward to answering questions. And I think, Lynn, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. Let me. All right. Well, welcome, folks. I'm Lynn Carter. I've been working with the IEEE Computer Society for many, many years, initially because of the work I was doing with ABET for computer science accreditation and software engineering accreditation. The world that we live in today consists of an incredible number of systems, many of which now have software components, if not controlling components for those systems. So from the outside world, it looks like hardware, but in reality, if it weren't for the computers, it would just be stuff. And we need these software intensive systems to be worthy of trust. And so as chair of the Systems and Software Engineering Standardization Committee, I find that it's important for us to reflect on how critical these systems are to just about everything we do. So from my perspective, it's getting harder and harder for us in the world to find products that are not somehow directly or indirectly controlled by some kind of software intensive system. And this means food, water, electricity, the basic elements of life. Computers are becoming a component of making that work. And these systems are becoming ever more complex. They're connecting with one another, and that connection is good news, but it also has some interesting challenges. Recent advances with artificial intelligence has definitely captured the market's attention. And everyone seems to be talking about how large language models and chat bots and so on and so forth are going to revolutionize work in almost any job. And the vision really appears to be, how can we come up with even new and better, more reliable 24/7 capabilities, but with fewer workers? And unfortunately, the vision that many project don't really properly cover the facts. And so part of our job in the IEEE is to make sure that current best practices are understood, are communicated, are made available, and the systems that are being built can provide the benefits that come from leveraging current best practices. Unfortunately, over and over again, we've seen in the news that there are systems that we tend to think of as worthy of trust that end up sometimes not being so worthy. Now, what the issue is, whether this is a hardware problem or a software problem or a political problem or a business problem, is really hard to tease out. And this is excellent article from the New York Times points out the challenges that was facing the world when the Boeing 737 MAX problem appeared on the scene through the loss of Lion Air Flight 610. This article makes it very clear that there were some technical issues, but there were a whole bunch of other system issues that weren't properly addressed. Management at Boeing at this particular time had a new aircraft that provides an amazing enhancement for operators of airlines and to the passengers. But unfortunately, this aircraft flies a little differently than the other 737s. And they believed that through software systems, they would be able to make the aircraft appear to be, to the pilot and to others, to be effectively the same aircraft, so that we don't have to have different training, different certifications, and so on and so forth. The idea was good, but unfortunately, the execution was not. And we ended up with a number of failures, not just in software, but failures in the hardware, failures in the process, failures in supervision, failures by the government regulators, and on and on. And so this raises a really important point. We are integrating so many things so quickly, it's really a challenge to figure out what best practices should be in place and how we deal with all of these complexities. Another example was the SolarWinds Orion breach of 2020, which caught a whole host of people by surprise. Everyone seems to be aware that it is possible to break into a computer and manipulate things. But this was the first time, at least that we are well aware of, that someone didn't break into the computer program, but rather broke into the development process and inserted modules of source code into the development team's library of source code. This malware was added, and since it wasn't from a requirement, there were no test cases to test it, there were no reviews of it, it just suddenly appeared. And with large teams, no one noticed that this stuff was there. And so the organization built the system and distributed it, and the malware was in it from that point forward. And eventually the backdoor led to the breaches. A more troubling one is the use of ransomware and the impact on organizations that are truly dependent on computing systems. This particular breach and this excellent article by Kevin Collier talks about an Illinois hospital that effectively had to close down due to the consequences of a ransomware attack. Now, there are, from my perspective, a number of interesting issues here. It's not like they didn't know that there might be risks with their software system, but they are not necessarily in the software business. And running a hospital and understanding how to invest your money is a particularly challenging job, let alone figuring out how to deal with software systems and security and the consequences that might take place. In this particular article, this hospital felt that it wasn't as important to deal with this potential ransomware issue as it was to deal with other things that were happening at the time. And considering what was going on in the world in 2021 and before, it's not hard to criticize them. They did what they thought was best, but unfortunately, the cost of the ransomware led to a financial crisis that led to the closing of the hospital. Now, directly, the ransomware did not kill anyone, but at the same time, the closing of the hospital, and this isn't the only hospital to close, resulted in support for various patients in many places to no longer being a short drive away to being hours away from getting medical care. And there is no doubt in my mind that people have died because of these hospitals shutting down. Another one that is particularly fascinating is the story of LLMs, the large language model artificial intelligence. Now, artificial intelligence has really been around for quite some time. In fact, back in 1973 and 74, as part of my master's work, I did a master's thesis that was involved in an aspect of artificial intelligence. So it's not like this field is new. LLMs, on the other hand, are new. They sprung onto the scene, and there's a lot of people who don't really understand how a large language model is similar to or different from other forms of artificial intelligence. And so the question about LLMs and hallucination have confused all sorts of people. And it's interesting to look at advertisements and position statements being made where they assert that we have an LLM which is hallucination free. Well, this particular article by a researcher at Arizona State University has made it very clear that by definition, an LLM is used to generate text. And as such, it uses whatever was available in its training data to produce what comes next after the words that have been produced up to this point. Its very nature is to create things. Now, that doesn't mean that all AIs do that. In fact, it isn't the nature of all AIs to do that. And so the question is, how do we make sure that we leverage the right standards and the right technologies to solve the problem at hand so the system is truly worthy of trust? So what I see we're facing is competition forcing everyone to be more creative. And we find ourselves with, in order to be creative, that organization cultures start to shift. And so the policies that were in place to be the bedrock of the organization start to become at odds with the organizational culture. And this is clearly what happened at Boeing and a number of other companies. Skilled technical workers are, by their very nature, expensive. And in fact, I've read a number of papers that referred to, rather than to these skilled technical workers as white-collar workers, referred to them as gold-collar workers because of their rarity and the impact that they have on the organization. So the real value in many organizations today are not in the buildings or the intellectual property, but rather in the skilled technical people inside of the organization. This has led to an interesting problem. There are benefits that come from having these skilled technical workers, And in order for these technical workers to do their jobs, they need to know how to work together, and they need to know how to leverage the experiences of this organization to address the needs and the wants, and to prepare themselves and their customers for what's coming next. To do that well basically requires a silo. You need more experienced people helping develop more junior people. And when we receive employees from universities or training organizations, or from just interested people who say, I want to work there, how do we transform them from these interested people into truly skilled technical workers worthy of trust? And this is the benefit of silos. At the same time, silos have a downside. And the challenge of a siloed downside is the fact that, well, we do things a certain way, but other elements of the organization do things in different ways. So marketing and sales tend to be looking in certain directions to do certain things. Developers want to create new and exciting things. Want to provide stable, predictable, reliable performance. And all of these various silos need technical workers who have very different goals in mind, even though they have a vision for providing the same kind of benefit and value to the customers who use that. Unfortunately, in our education system and in the mentoring and coaching silos of most organizations, there's little opportunity to find common ground between these various silos. And that makes it very difficult to learn how to practice speaking truth to power. What is particularly frustrating, I know for a number of people, and I read about the Challenger disaster and the people at Morton Thiokol saying you should not launch that rocket, that shuttle with these low temperatures, and they went ahead and launched it anyway. How do you communicate effectively and compellingly? How do you build the kind of relationship? So we have pressures for continual profit, and I understand that. But we need to make sure that the pressures for profit is balanced appropriately to make sure that the functionality and the work of the fewer workers actually produce the kinds of products that are worthy of trust and worthy of being integrated into the very fabric of what humanity is today. So I believe that a sea change is needed. I think we have important elements inside of industry, academia, standards bodies, and governmental organizations. But we need to come up with a better way of thinking about silos and how to collaborate these silos together more effectively. The challenge that we see with leadership and technical domains working effectively together, these things depend on silos. How one becomes a senior leader in an organization is not something that is fully done at a university or fully done in any other place. The leadership for this organization is dependent on understanding this organization's culture, this organization's values, and this organization's history and the ecosystem of collaboration across all of the other organizations that work with this organization to serve the clients and the customers that use the products of the organization. Many firms have chosen to outsource to address this complexity. And they face the issue not just of complexity, but the speed which elements in that complexity are changing. And they are seeing competitive pressures that make it even more challenging for organizations, and that forces the creation of even more silos. So the sea change that I see is that we need to think of these silos instead of being a stovepipe. I'd like to think of them as a thread. And I believe that one of the new standard best practices that the IEEE and that industry and society more broadly needs to do is learn how to weave standards together to produce what I call an enhanced quality fabric. It's not possible for any one of these standards by itself to produce the kind of complex, broad-reaching systems that are necessary for today's society and for what we want the future to be. For it to work, we need collaboration. And that collaboration means that we need graduates with both the knowledge of enduring value, but also the skills to effectively employ current best practice. And the typical way that most universities and training organizations and even companies tend to use to deliver knowledge and skills tends to take too long compared to the speed with which many of our technologies are developing and many of our technologies are reinventing how things are done. With that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me. I find the role that the IEEE plays, this computer society plays, and the other societies working together is crucial, but it's time for us to recognize that speed is becoming a more important issue than before, and the time scale to come up with enhanced standards and enhanced best practices and getting those standards and best practices into the hands of the people who actually do the work is something that we all need to work together more effectively to accomplish the vision that we all have. With that, I'll turn it back to you folks. Thank you.
Thank you, my Vice Chair Lin. And many of you may also know, actually, Lin is also our standard committee chair of the software and system engineering. So that's why I also invite him, not only because he is on the leadership together with me on the standard activity boards, but also he can provide you the vision about what under his leadership, under the software and system engineering standard committee that he may want to do for the standardization. Because I also understand from the SIG question that actually many of you are from the software side rather than the networking side. So that's why I invite him to also have a speech about what we are doing on the software and system engineering perspective. And I understand we may be short of time, but before I answer a question, I just want to provide many of you some resources that you can also have chance to take a look. For example, in our Computer Society website, you can actually go to the board and committees, then you will find our Computer Society Standard Activities website. As I mentioned, we have 17 standard committees covering different topics. You can actually, through this link and then through this page, and then to link back to different standard committee and know more about what they are doing and contact the leadership if you would like to participate. And also, like what Jonathan mentioned about, for example, how to start a new standard committee and how the standard work. Even though after the end of the talk, we will share with you the slides that they represent, but you can also, through the resources page here, to link to the Standard Association web page so that you can also know about how the standard work in IEEE. And then, as we always mention, there are always activities and opportunities for you to join. And actually, there's another page that also under the previous page, a link that we always have the top course for participation that you can always find the latest information about standard related activities that you may be able to participate or contribute. For example, anything related to SIP funding, or for example, the new standard call for participation. So you can have a look, and then you can contact the working group chair or the program manager to ask for more information. And also another thing is that I understand many of you, especially you are coming from research institute or university, you may have a very good IEEE subscription from the IEEE Explorer that you can also access the standards. But for those of you may have limited subscription on the IEEE Explorer, you actually go to the IEEE Explorer. If you found the IEEE GET program, for this GET program, as long as you have a IEEE free account, I mean, even though you may not be an IEEE member, but if you are IEEE, if you just sign up an IEEE, I mean a free complimentary IEEE account, you can actually go to, for example, download the design automation standard that I mentioned before that. They are doing great for the System C, Verilog, and different things. Oh, I clicked the wrong link. And actually, I clicked the wrong link, sorry. So, for example, you can click inside and then you can download their standards after you enter the personal info and ask a few questions. And for example, for Wi-Fi, for 802, you can also hear the Get 802 standard. Again, you just need a free account, and then you can download many of the very high level, high quality market relevant standards. And actually, our society also have some standards related to the environmental assessment, related to sustainability. This is our 1680 series that you can also download. So this is the GET program. You can Google it or using your own search engine to find this kind of information that I hope is helpful. And then for the Q&A, I understand there's a question saying that from Sergio, IEEE standard may take years to be put in place. However, AI is developing at a very quick pace today. How can IEEE adjust AI standard while keeping up with its pace of development? So at the end, as Jonathan may share with you, it is really a consensus-based standard. We aim to do, develop standards that many of our stakeholders, no matter you are users, no matter you are the manufacturers, as long as you are in the ecosystem, that you really want to agree with a common set of requirements to implement. Sometimes it can be quick to reach consensus. Sometimes it can be long to reach consensus. And at the end, it also depends on how difficult the topic is. So some of the standard, actually, I understand some of the standards, they may take, not related to AI, but some other standard may take 3 to 4 years or 5 years to complete. But some of our standard may just take 1 or 2 years. And also, actually, from from my personal perspective, some of the standard actually, even though they may live 3 or 4 years to develop, after 2 years or so, actually the contents of the standards are already stabilized, that the manufacturers or the software developers can already to implement a preliminary version, because the final version may not be a big change to the version that are stabilized. So at the end, yes, I agree that some of the standard may take long, but some of the standard, whenever they loaded their urgent need, they actually now they're doing much faster than before. And another question I see is that how the participants will be able to receive a copy of this webinar for future reference. And I believe, Scott, if I put you on the spot, I believe that you will send to all of our 200 plus registrants for today's webinar, right? For those 200 plus registrants participants who register, they will receive a copy of this free presentation and recording, right?
Yeah, everyone who registered will receive a copy of the slides and recording for future reference.
Yes, and lastly, I understand it's already over 1. Please feel free to contact us offline for any question, for any pointer, and for anything that you would like to know more about our standard activities under Computer Society. We are very happy to discuss with you and answer any questions. And in future, if there's any opportunities, We may also work with our membership team to see if there's any meet and greet section so that you may know some of us more in person. So in this case, you can also have chance to talk with us in person and to know more about our standard operation. So in the meantime, let us know if there's any final question that you would like to answer.
Actually, there were a bunch of questions that came in advance. I know we're a little over, but I wouldn't mind throwing one sort of question to both Edward and Lane and Jonathan as staff, if you have anything to add. Edward, you did a great job there at the end of sort of showing some of the current calls for proposals and how you can find the standards information on our website. But how or why did you each get involved? You both obviously worked pretty high up our proverbial standards totem pole. But what made you two each for get involved in the first place? Edward, we'll start with you, and then Lance, you can add your story.
Well, I believe I actually speak too much already. I would probably to let Lin to first address this question and Jonathan to see where it is. I just don't want to dominate the talk. Lin and Jonathan, any feedback for this question?
Well, from my perspective, I got involved in standardization because I wanted to learn about DevOps. And I took a look at books and I took a look at stuff, and I found a bunch of people writing stuff who I never heard of. I didn't know anything about them. And so I asked a colleague of mine at the Software Engineering Institute and said, there's this IEEE working group you need to talk to. There's some really great people. And I realized this was the best way for me to educate myself. So I volunteered to be a part of that working group in order to learn what is current from these other experts. Because if you wait for a textbook and then wait for a university to turn that textbook into a course, that takes a long time. And the chance to work directly with people who are doing things in the field and actually doing things, from my perspective. So that's what got me involved. And the more that I learned and the more that I participated and the more questions that I asked, I kept getting requests, why don't you help here? And why don't you help there? And suddenly I find myself getting a phone call from Edward saying, you have an interesting perspective on the way that things work. Why don't you help me? And I keep learning. And face it, folks, if you're going to be current in today's world, you have to spend almost as much time and energy staying current and engaging and learning from others like you, as opposed to thinking that I got my fancy degree, I have my lovely house, now I can just simply work. That doesn't work that way. This field is changing so fast, and it needs all of us to be constantly learning and practicing. Turn it back to you.
Great. Yeah, because Lin actually, when Scott introduced him, actually, he is a faculty member, and actually, I am from industry actually. So actually, I always receive questions from many students or postdoc or faculty members about, well, why we need to engage in standard, right? Because we already have many things to do for paper publications, for journal publications. But as Neem mentioned, it is really a good chance and good opportunity for you to know more about the industry and also to see what are the real world problems and challenge that the industry are facing. So this is also a good opportunity for all, for many of you, if you are interested, to at least know about what a particular field is doing and what's the challenge that they would like to resolve, what kind of technical requirements they may want to have. Also discuss and have a common consensus. And actually, I know that time is already overrun. The last question I understand, Scott, is that there's a Q&A asking, is there any roadmap to get standard development experience? The point is, we have 17 committees. Each of us have different roadmaps. So the point is it really depends which kind of areas you want to focus. Send me an email. I will type my email just here, and then if you have let me know which kind of things that you want. Soham, and then I will try to link you with a better person to connect you and then to let you ease into the standard contributions and participation. Okay, so Scott, I believe I don't want to keep all of you beyond the hour already. So shall we conclude the webinar today, Scott?
Yeah, that sounds good. So first, I would like to thank Edward, Jonathan, and Len for sharing a lot of great insight in what the Standards Activities Board is, what it does, what's next, and answering a few of your questions. I think a lot of the questions that were submitted in advance, they did a wonderful job of covering in their presentations. And again, I would like to thank everyone for attending and everyone who participated and submitted a ton of great questions. We got just so many questions in advance. So thank you. Just a quick program, before we say goodbye, the IEEE Computer Sci has a few webinars coming up over the next few weeks. We have one in about, I guess, 8 days on the 24th from our Career Accelerator series, Leading the Unleadable, How to Manage Mavericks, Cynics, Divas, and Other Difficult People. From this Standards Activities webinar series, this is a monthly webinar series. We'll have one on May 14th titled Adaptive Management Principles and Their Application to Cloud Computing. And then on May 16th, we will have another Career Accelerator webinar called The Intersection of AI and Project Management. You'll receive a link to the recording and a link to register for all these webinars in a follow-up email. Thank you again to our guests, Edward, Jonathan, and Lynn, and thank you all for attending. Have a great rest of your day or evening.
Thank you. Thank you so much all for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye, folks.